Hey folks, Bob Wolf here, Senior Building Inspector for Woodland Springs, USA. 27 years on the job, and let me tell you, I've seen every construction disaster you can imagine. Shoddy decks that wobble like a bad dance move, unpermitted man caves with wiring that'd make an electrician cry. Even a guy who tried to turn an old Chevy pickup into a hot tub, duct tape and all. But nothing, and I mean nothing, holds a candle to the Three Pigs incident of 2023. The media? Oh, they had a blast. Big Bad Bob terrorizes local homeowners. Clickbait nonsense that spread faster than a wildfire in a drought. I was just doing my job, enforcing the International Building Code 2021 edition with our local Woodland Springs amendments. So grab a coffee, maybe a whole pot, and settle in for the real story. This is the untold truth of the Three Pigs, straight from my inspector's clipboard. And trust me, it's a wild ride that'll take us through every violation, every huff and puff, and every lie the newspapers printed about me. Woodland Springs is a small town with big problems. Picture a place where main streets lined with mom and pop diners. The annual county fair is a bigger deal than the Super Bowl, and everybody knows everybody's business. But beneath the charm, we've got a dark side. Unpermitted construction. It's a plague. We're in a high wind zone, with flash floods every spring and the occasional tornado warning. Building codes aren't just rules here. They're the difference between a cozy home and a pile of rubble. My job is to make sure folks don't cut corners, because when they do, people get hurt. The Three Pigs incident wasn't just a case, it was a wake-up call for this town. And I'm here to set the record straight, from the first hotline tip to the singed fur on my tail. So let's dive in. Before we get to the pigs, let me tell you how I ended up as the guy nobody wants knocking on their door. I grew up in Woodland Springs, back when it was just a speck on the map. My dad was a carpenter, the kind who'd spend hours sanding a single board to perfection. He taught me to respect a well-built structure, to see the beauty in a level foundation or a properly braced wall. I didn't plan on following in his footsteps, though. As a kid, I wanted to be a park ranger, maybe work in the national forest nearby, guiding hikers and spotting wildlife. But life's funny like that. After high school, I needed a summer job, so I took a gig with the Woodland Springs Building Department, checking permits for backyard sheds and garage conversions. It was supposed to be temporary, just something to pay for college, but I got hooked. There's something satisfying about catching a violation before it becomes a disaster. My first big case was in 1999, my rookie year. A family in the Oak Grove neighborhood built a treehouse for their kid's birthday party. No permit, no structural review, just a mess of plywood nailed to an old maple. I warned them it wasn't safe, but they brushed me off. "It's just for kids, Bob," they said. 2 days later, the thing collapsed mid-party. Kids were swinging on a rope when the whole platform gave way. Thank goodness nobody was seriously hurt, just some bruises and a lot of tears, but it stuck with me. That's when I realized, codes aren't just paperwork, they save lives. Over the years, I've seen it all. The 2005 gazebo disaster, where a guy used recycled pallet wood and rusty nails for a backyard wedding venue. It collapsed during the first dance, and let's just say the bride wasn't thrilled. Then there was the 2010 Beanstalk incident, where a local eccentric tried to build a 50-foot climbing tower without a single permit, took out half a block when it fell. And don't get me started on the Three Bears Unpermitted Home Edition in 2018. Goldilocks still sends me hate mail, claiming I ruined her Airbnb business. Point is, I've been around the block, and I've got the scars and the HR complaints to prove it. I also crossed paths with Barry the Beaver early on. He's a local contractor, obsessive about straight lines and proper permits. Back in 2002, he tipped me off about an illegal dock on the river. Guy built it out of driftwood and fishing line, if you can believe it. Barry's been my unofficial snitch ever since, always calling the hotline with some new complaint. Annoying? Sure, but he's usually right. Which brings us to the Three Pigs. It all started on a Monday morning when the department's compliance hotline lit up. Barry the Beaver, yep, him again, called in, tail practically spinning with outrage. "Unauthorized construction in Lower Pines," he barked. "3 houses, no permits, shoddy materials, the works." I could hear him chomping on a pencil, his usual stress habit. Barry's the kind of guy who'd report a crooked mailbox or a fence post that's off by half an inch, but I respect a good tip, keeps the town safe. I thanked him, hung up, and pulled the records. Nothing. No permits, no blueprints, no soil tests, no structural calculations. Zilch. This is Woodland Springs, folks. We're in a high wind zone with gusts up to 40 miles an hour in spring. Flash floods turn backyards into swamps, and tornado warnings aren't uncommon. You can't just slap up a house like it's a pop-up taco stand. Barry's tip mentioned 3 new structures, built practically overnight, one made of straw, one made of sticks, and one made of bricks. Straw? Sticks? In this town? That's not a neighborhood. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. I headed to the office to dig deeper. The building department's a cramped little building off Main Street, next to the diner where everybody argues about football and pie. Linda, our permit clerk, was at her desk surrounded by stacks of forms and a coffee mug that says, "I survived the 2010 Beanstalk fiasco." I asked her to check for any recent filings in Lower Pines. She raised an eyebrow. "Lower Pines? Nobody's built there since the Johnson's garage in '15. She tapped away at her ancient computer, then shook her head. "Nada, Bob. Whoever's building out there didn't bother with us." I grabbed the preliminary photos from our code enforcement team. Alarming doesn't even cover it. The straw house looked like a hay bale explosion, the kind you'd see at a fall festival, not a residential lot. The stick house was a pile of twigs, like a kid's fort gone really wrong. The brick house looked promising, but without a permit or mason certification, it was still suspect. Our meteorology department was forecasting 40 miles an hour winds that week, and with flood season around the corner, I wasn't taking chances. Municipal Code Section 109.3 lets me inspect immediately in cases of imminent structural failure, so I scheduled the visits for the next morning. I had a bad feeling about this one. I ran into my colleague Dave in the break room. He's been with the department almost as long as I have, but he's more laid back, always joking about retiring to Florida. "Heard about the pigs, Bob," he said, stirring his coffee. I grunted. "They'll learn. Code's the code." Dave laughed. "Just don't huff and puff too hard. Last time you got zealous, we had to replace the department truck's tires." I wasn't wrong. I've been known to get a bit intense, but with 3 unpermitted houses in a high-risk zone, intensity was warranted. Tuesday, morning 9 a.m. sharp. I pulled up to the first house in my department-issued pickup, clipboard in hand, hard hat on, badge clipped to my khakis. The straw house, owned by Pete Pig, was a nightmare. Picture a pile of straw, loosely tied with twine, pretending to be a house. No foundation, no footers, no structural supports. It violated every section of the International Building Code, section R301.21 for wind resistance. I could see daylight through the gaps, and a slight breeze was already making the whole thing sway like a drunk scarecrow. One good gust, and this thing would be scattered across the protected owl habitat next door, probably triggering an environmental fine on top of everything. I knocked on what they called a door, more like a straw curtain flapping in the wind, and followed protocol. Little pig, let me come in," I called out. Yeah, it's a goofy greeting. Been in the manual since the 80s. Our legal team keeps promising to update it, but they're too busy fighting lawsuits from angry homeowners. I sighed, adjusted my hard hat, and pulled out my tablet to start documenting. No load-bearing walls, no wind bracing. The straw wasn't even properly secured. Half of it was already blowing into the neighbor's yard. This wasn't a house. It was a fire hazard with a side of structural failure. I flashed back to a case from 2003, my first year as a senior inspector. A firmer in the Meadow District tried to build a barn out of straw bales, claiming it was eco-friendly. No permits, no structural review, just a mess of plywood nailed to an old maple. I warned them it wasn't safe, but they brushed me off. "It's just natural, Bob," he said. 2 days later, the barn collapsed. Pete's house was giving me the same vibes, but worse.
With those winds coming, I had to test the lateral force resistance. I set up my standard procedure, nothing fancy, just a controlled push to simulate wind load. One huff and puff, and the whole thing collapsed faster than a bad startup. Straw flew everywhere like a hay fever nightmare. Pete came scrambling out, squealing like I'd personally insulted his family, and bolted towards his brother's place before I could slap a stop work order on the debris. I stood there, surrounded by straw, and noted, inspection refused, structure unsafe. 1 down, 2 to go.
Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Three Pigs incident, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more stories from the front lines of code enforcement. Got a building horror story? Drop it in the comments and I'll see you in the next video.